The rodeo lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the dirt-covered arena. The crowd was unusually quiet for a Saturday night in Dry Creek, Texas. At the center stood a massive bull named Clementine, a beast built like a freight train, muscles rippling beneath a coat of deep brown. He had already thrown 5 riders that evening like rag dolls, one after the other. No one had lasted more than a few seconds. Clementine wasn't just mean, he was different, wild, angry, like he was carrying something that went far beyond. Instinct dot near the rail. Older cowboys with weathered faces and sun-damaged skins stood in silence, arms crossed, watching the arena as if expecting something more than another fall. Among them was Wade Hollis, quiet as ever, lips tight around, a toothpick, eyes fixed on the pen gate. He knew this feeling, this eerie stillness. It was the kind of quiet that came before something broke loose, or something broke down. Then, without a word, the gate creaked open again. No announcer called a name. No music played. Just slow, steady footsteps on dry dirt. A tall man stepped into the arena, hat in hand, coat long and dusted from the road. For a moment, the crowd didn't react. Then, whispers began to ripple through the stands like wind through wheat. "Is that Orson Pike?" Someone finally asked. It was. After 20 years gone, the legendary rider had returned. The same Orson Pike who once ruled the rodeo circuit, then disappeared without a trace after a tragedy folks had long stopped talking about. His hair was gray now, his shoulders broader, his face carved by time, but his presence hadn't changed. He didn't speak, didn't wave. He simply stared at the bull. Clementine stood his ground, snorting and stamping his hooves like thunder, but he didn't charge. Instead, the beast tilted his head slightly, eyes locked on Orson as if recognizing him from another life. The crowd watched in disbelief as Clementine, the same bull who had dominated the arena all night, slowly bent one front leg, and then the other, until his massive frame dropped to the dirt. He knelt, Wade's breath caught in his throat. Up in the stands, jaws dropped. And in the shadows behind the chute, a younger cowboy named Levi Crandall stood frozen, staring at. The man he never knew was his father. Wade whispered under his breath, almost like a confession only the dust could hear. "Well, Hal, he remembers." Levi Crandall hadn't moved. He was still standing just behind the chute, boots planted in the dirt like they had taken root. The image of Clementine kneeling burned into his mind, impossible to shake. That bull had taken down every rider with bone-breaking fury except him. That old man hadn't even touched the rope, hadn't said a word, and the monster just gave in. Levi's fists clenched around the fence rail. His knuckles turned white. Orson Pike, a name that meant nothing to him growing up, yet somehow it now meant everything. He didn't know the full story. He'd only ever heard whispers, old rodeo legends about a rider who vanished after a tragedy, leaving the circuit behind like a ghost. His mother, God rest her, never spoke that name. Every time Levi asked about his father, she'd change the subject or leave the room. It was a wound she'd carried quietly, and now Levi was starting to feel the weight of it too. Something inside him twisted, part confusion, part anger, and a whole lot of disbelief. Wade Hollis walked up behind him, slow like he didn't want to startle the boy. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. Levi didn't answer right away. His jaw was tight, eyes still locked on the arena, where Orson now stood beside Clementine like a preacher next to a choir member. "Is that really him?" Levi finally asked. Wade nodded. "Yeah, it's him." He didn't offer more, didn't explain how he knew, or what Orson's return really meant. But his voice carried something heavy, like a weight he'd been carrying for years just got heavier. Levi scoffed, shaking his head. 28 years. Not a letter. not a damn visit. And now he just shows up and makes a bull kneel like he's some kind of prophet? What the hell am I supposed to do with that? His voice cracked at the end, but he forced himself to steady it. He didn't want to sound like a boy looking for a father. He wanted to sound like a man who didn't need one. Inside the arena, Orson finally turned his head, as if he could feel the heat of Levi's stare. Their eyes met, just for a moment. No words. No recognition. Just something unspoken, a flicker, brief and painful. Then Orson tipped his hat and walked out of the ring dot, and Levi Crandall realized something deep in his bones. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The next morning, Dry Creek was buzzing. Not from the rodeo winds or the usual small-town gossip, but from one man's return. At the corner diner, folks leaned over chipped coffee mugs, whispering the same name, Orson Pike. Some were in awe. Others were skeptical. But everyone agreed on one thing. When a bull like Clementine drops to his knees for a man, something deeper is going on. Out at the edge of town, in a little red barn that smelled of hay and iodine, Twyla James wiped her hands on a towel and looked out toward the hills. She'd been the town's veterinarian for over 30 years. Had seen calves born, bulls buried, and a hell of a lot of rodeo riders patched up in between. But nothing in her long life had prepared her for the sight of Orson Pike standing alone in that arena. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since. She knew he'd come see her. She felt it like a storm moving in before the clouds even formed, and she was right. Before noon, his old pickup rolled down the gravel road like a ghost returning home. When he stepped out, same coat, same silence. Twyla didn't say a word. She just nodded toward the barn. They hadn't seen each other in 22 years, but the weight between them never left. Inside, it was quiet. Orson leaned against a stall post while Twyla poured 2 cups of black coffee. No sugar. Just the way he used to take it. "You should've stayed gone," she finally said, not looking at him. Orson didn't flinch. "Didn't have a choice," he answered, voice low and tired. "Not anymore." She set the mug in front of him. "You do realize who that boy is, don't you? That rider last night. That's Levi, your son." He nodded slowly, like the truth had already cut him open long ago. "I figured. Looks like her. Stubborn like me." Twyla sat down across from him, her eyes wet but steady. "He thinks you're a ghost. Hell, we all did. But ghosts don't make bulls kneel." That was something else, Orson. Something unfinished. Orson took a slow sip of his coffee. His hand trembled slightly. "I didn't come back to be a father. I came back because something in me won't rest until I face what I left behind." Outside the barn, Levi Crandall pulled up in his truck, unaware of the conversation unfolding inside. He wasn't looking for answers, but he was about to get them anyway. Levi Crandall slammed his truck door a little harder than he meant to. He hadn't planned on stopping at Twyla James's barn that day. He'd just been driving, trying to quiet the thoughts bouncing around in his head since the night before. But something pulled him there, a gut instinct, like his mother used to call it. Maybe it was the way Wade Hollis had looked at him. Or maybe it was just plain anger with nowhere else to go. Inside the barn, Orson Pike stiffened at the sound of boots crunching gravel. He didn't look up, but Twyla did. Her eyes met Levi's just as he stepped through the open door. The silence was immediate and thick. Levi's gaze shifted from Twyla to the man sitting across from her, holding a coffee mug like it was a lifeline. Recognition hit hard. "You've got a lot of nerve," Levi said, voice sharp. "Showing. Up here like some old cowboy prophet after disappearing for a lifetime." Orson didn't defend himself, didn't rise, just looked up slowly and met his son's eyes. The resemblance was undeniable now that they were face to face, same jawline, same fire behind the stare. "You don't know the whole story, Orson," sighed, calm but heavy. Levi laughed bitterly. I know enough. My mom cried herself to sleep some nights, thinking I didn't hear. She begged God for strength, and you know what? She raised me without a damn word from you. I know enough. Twyla stepped in before either of them could go further. That's enough, she said firmly, standing between them. Both of you? She turned to Levi. Your mama was my best friend, and she did what she thought was right. But Orson didn't just walk away without reason. You may not want to hear it now, but one day you will. Orson stood slowly, tipping his hat back onto his head. I ain't a skin for forgiveness, he said, and I ain't here to rewrite the past. I just needed to see it one last time. He started to walk past Levi, but the younger man didn't move out of the way. They stood close, shoulder to shoulder, with years of silence buzzing between them. Then look hard, Levi muttered, because you won't be around for the next chapter. Orson didn't respond, just kept walking, boots dragging dust as he disappeared out the door. Back inside, Twyla exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of a past that refused to stay buried. The town of Dry Creek had seen its fair share of fights, bar brawls, family feuds, broken hearts. But no one ever talked about the fight that changed everything. The one that took Delilah Ames's brother, left Orson Pike broken, and sent him packing into silence for 2 decades. That story had been buried deeper than a coffin. Until now, Orson didn't go home that night. He didn't have a home to go to. Instead, he parked his truck on the edge of Black Hollow Ridge, where the wind always whispered like it remembered. In his rearview mirror, the town's lights flickered faintly in the distance. But what filled his mind was something else, something he tried to outrun. A man's scream, a gunshot, blood in the dirt. He was lost in those memories when he heard tires roll up behind him. A second truck parked beside his, engine idling. Orson didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Sheriff Zeke Farnsworth stepped out, his wide frame outlined by the headlights. The man was older now, grayer, but his presence still filled a room or a ridge. He didn't wear the badge with pride anymore, just habit. You picked a hell of a time to come back, Zeke said, voice low, gravelly. I didn't come to cause trouble, Orson replied without turning. Just needed to see the boy. Needed to face the dust I left behind. Zeke walked closer, boots crunching the gravel beneath. You're staring up more than dust. Folks been whispering about that night again. About what really happened. You think Clementine kneeling was a sign? Or a warning? Orson finally turned, meeting the sheriff's eyes. You were there, he said quietly. You saw how it all went down. You know, I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. Zeke's jaw tightened. He looked down at the dirt, the way guilty men sometimes do when truth presses too hard. Doesn't matter now. We both stayed quiet. We buried it together. Yeah, Orson said. But maybe we buried the wrong man. There was a long silence between them, filled only by the wind. Then Zeke said something Orson didn't expect. Levi's got a right to know the truth. About his mama. About you. About that night. Orson's hands curled around the steering wheel, knuckles pale. I know, he muttered. And I think the truth's finally coming for all of us. As Zeke walked back to his truck, Orson stayed frozen, staring out into the darkness, where memories waited to rise with the morning light. Levi Crandall had never been one for digging through the past. He'd always figured it was better to keep your boots moving forward and leave the ghosts where they were. But something about seeing Orson Pike again, his silence, his guilt, had started to eat away at the wall Levi had built around his memories. And now, that wall was cracking. He found himself back at his mother's old house, the one that had been sitting empty since she passed. Dust coated every surface like time had stopped the moment she left this world. He hadn't been back in over a year, couldn't bring himself to face it. But now, he wandered from room to room, drawn by something he couldn't name. His mother's spirit still lingered here in her old perfume, the worn-out Bible on the nightstand, and the framed photo of him as a child with no father in the background in the corner of her bedroom. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet. One spot gave more than the rest. Curious, he knelt down and pried the board up with a pocket knife. Inside the small space was a weathered envelope, yellowed by time. On the front, in his mother's handwriting, were just 2 words: for Levi. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter inside was dated 22 years ago. My sweet Levi, if you're reading this, it means the truth finally came looking for you. I never wanted to keep it from you. I wanted to protect you from the weight, the blame, the grief. That wasn't yours to carry. Your father, Orson Pike, did not abandon us. He was trying to save us from a storm that neither of us could stop. What happened the night Delilah's brother died? It wasn't what the town believes. Levi, read the words again. Slower this time, as if they might change. But they didn't. They only grew heavier. Your father tried to tell the truth, but the truth wasn't welcome. Zeke Farnsworth and I agreed to keep quiet for your safety, but silence doesn't heal. I see that now. He folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it might crumble in his hands. His heart pounded. All these years, he'd hated a man for vanishing, when in reality, that man had been carrying the weight of a lie too big to speak aloud. Asterisk, asterisk, out on the porch, Millie Ray Thompson pulled up in her truck. She stepped out, saw Levi's pale face through the window, and knew something had shifted. Inside, Levi stared at the open floorboard and realized this wasn't just family history. It was unfinished business. Millie Ray Thompson stepped lightly onto the porch, her boots making soft thuds on the old wood. She didn't say anything right away. She just watched Levi Crandall through the screen door as he sat slumped at the kitchen table, that yellowed letter clutched in his hand like it was a map to something buried deep. The look in his eyes told her everything. The fire was back, but now it burned with purpose instead of anger. She finally opened the door. "You okay?" she asked softly, though she already knew the answer. Levi didn't look up. My whole life, I thought he left us. Thought he was a coward. But this, he held up the letter. She kept the truth locked away under the dam. Floor. Millie took a seat across from him. Your mama was trying to protect you. That town chews up people who go digging where they shouldn't. He stared at her. You knew. She hesitated, then gave a quiet nod. I was young, but yeah, I knew something went wrong that night. Delilah's brother, Clyde, he was drunk, and looking for a fight. Word is, he came at your daddy with a tire iron. What happened after that? Zeke made sure no one ever talked about it. Levi stood suddenly, chair scraping the floor. Then it's time they start talking, because I've been walking around with someone else's silence in my chest for 28 years, and I'm done carrying it. Millie's eyes didn't. Leave his. Be careful, Levi. Zeke's still sheriff. Folks around here protect their own version of the truth. He nodded, jaw tight. Then I'll give him a new one. That afternoon, Levi drove into town, straight to the old municipal building where Sheriff Zeke Farnsworth's office sat behind a dusty window that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton years. He didn't knock. He just walked in. Zeke looked up from his desk, already knowing what was coming. So, he said calmly, you read the letter. Levi stood tall. I'm not here to ask permission. I'm here to say the truth's about. To come out, you can either stand with it or get buried under it. Zeke leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. You think the truth's gonna fix what this town became, Levi? Levi didn't blink. No, but it might fix what I became. The sheriff stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded once. Not in agreement, just recognition. The line had been drawn. The Dry Creek Arena was nearly empty when Levi Crandall stepped onto the dirt floor. The sun was setting behind the bleachers, casting long shadows across the ground where legends were made and buried. In the center stood Clementine, calm now, like the storm in him had settled. He wasn't bucking or pacing, just waiting . And so was Orson Pike. The old man stood just outside the chute, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn coat, watching his son from afar. He didn't say anything. He hadn't all day. He figured Levi would come here eventually. Sometimes it's not a conversation a man needs, it's a place. Levi approached the bull slowly, not to ride, but to remember. I used to come here at night when I was a kid, he said out loud, not facing Orson. Back when Mama would cry in the kitchen and think I couldn't hear. I'd climb the fence and sit right there. He pointed to the rail, and I'd pretend there was a man in the chute. My father, getting ready for the ride. Orson didn't move. I was in that chute once, he finally said. Long before Clementine, before the lies, before the silence. I thought if I walked away, maybe I could stop the pain from spreading. You didn't stop it, Levi snapped. He turned now, eyes blazing. You just passed it down. The air between them felt electric. Orson took a step forward. I know, and I'm sorry, but I also know I can't change it. All I can do now is tell you what really happened and stand beside it when it lands. Behind them, Wade Hollis, Twyla James, Millie Ray, and even Sheriff. Zeke had gathered at the edge of the arena, quiet, watching, as if the town itself had been waiting for this. Moment two. I found the letter, Levi said. She told me the truth. Orson nodded. Then, you know it wasn't just a fight, it was survival. Clyde came at us both. I stopped him. Zeke told me to disappear. Said it was the only way to protect you. Levi looked down at the dust, then back at Clementine. Funny thing is, it wasn't Clementine that broke me. It was realizing the man I hated was carrying my pain the whole time. They stood in silence for a beat . And then, for the first time, Orson Pike said it. I never stopped loving you. Levi, not for a second. Levi swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I know. By morning, word had spread through Dry Creek like wildfire. It wasn't just the town gossip this time. It was the truth, crawling its way out of the past after 22 years buried under silence. Folks whispered about what happened in the arena the night before, about Levi Crandall and Orson Pike standing face to face beneath the setting sun. Some were angry, some were relieved, and some just didn't know what to believe anymore. Inside, Delilah Ames's diner, the usual breakfast crowd sat unusually quiet. Even Delilah herself, usually quick to offer opinions and pour coffee with bite, kept glancing at the TV on the wall. The local news hadn't picked up the story yet, but that didn't matter. Around here, a look could say more than a headline. Ever could. Back at the ranch, Orson stood near the barn, running his hands along Clementine's flank. The bull had become strangely calm since that night, no longer the furious beast that tossed riders like paper dolls. It was as if, somehow, the truth had calmed them both. Levi approached, slower this time, his usual fire replaced with something steadier. I signed up for the main event tonight, Levi said, arms crossed. Clementine's my draw. Orson turned to face him. You sure about that? Levi nodded. Not because I have to prove something. Not to the town, not to you. I'm doing it because I'm finally ready to ride for me. Orson nodded once, pride flickering behind his tired eyes. Then ride smart. Ride strong. And no matter what happens, you make sure that bull knows your name. That night, the arena was full . Every seat taken. Folks from all corners of the county came to see what many called the last ride of Dry Creek. Sheriff Zeke Farnsworth stood behind the gates, arms crossed, quiet. Twyla James watched from the rail, hands tight around the thermos of coffee she hadn't touched. Millie Ray leaned forward in the stands, heart pounding louder than the music. Levi sat atop Clementine, one hand gripping the rope, the other raised high. He didn't look nervous. He looked freed out as the gate opened and the bull launched forward. The crowd held its breath. Dust flew. Muscles clashed. 8 seconds felt like a lifetime, and when the buzzer finally sounded, Levi was still holding on, stronger than ever, riding not just a bull, but the weight of generations. He dismounted, breathing hard, heart wide open, and in the crowd, Orson Pike smiled for the first time in years. The sun was rising slow, and golden over Dry Creek, painting the sky with soft streaks of orange and pink. The dust from the night before had finally settled, but something in the air felt different, lighter. For the first time in decades, the town had seen something real, something honest. Levi Crandall had ridden the bull no one could tame, but more than that, he had ridden through pain, silence, and years of bitterness. And now, there was nothing left to prove Dot in the quiet barn. Orson Pike stood beside Clementine, running a slow hand down the bull's thick neck. The animal had changed. No longer wild, no longer angry, just still. Orson knew that what they had all witnessed wasn't just a ride. It was a reckoning, and maybe a release. Levi stepped in, hat in hand, dirt still on his boots. He looked tired, but in the kind of way that comes after a burden is finally set down. "He didn't buck the way I expected," he said softly. Orson nodded, because he wasn't fighting anymore. Neither were you. There was a long pause between them, not awkward, just full of things that didn't need to be said out loud anymore. Then Levi reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded letter. "I'm not gonna hide this," he said. "I'm gonna let people read it. Let them know what really happened to Mama. What really happened to you." Orson looked at the letter and then back at his son. "Do what you have to do, but promise me something." Levi raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Don't let it define you. Let it teach you." Later that afternoon, Sheriff Zeke Farnsworth turned in his badge. No press, no speech. Just left it on his desk and walked out the door. Twyla James posted the letter on the church bulletin board for anyone who wanted the truth. And Delilah Ames finally sat down across from Orson Pike at her diner. Not to forgive, but to listen. As for Levi, he wrote again. Not to escape, but to remember. Every time his boots hit the dirt, he wrote for something bigger than revenge. He wrote for the ones who came before, the ones who fell silent, and the ones still finding their voice. At the edge of the arena, Orson Pike stood watching, hands in his coat pockets, heart at peace for the first time in years. Some rides end with a fall. Others end with a man finally standing tall.